Okay, for this video, we're going to talk about the lessons that are part of Project 5, and that includes creating shapes in text. Now, what I will tell you is that Photoshop is not the place for text. You want to use Illustrator for text. And the reason is Photoshop is raster imaging, so any text you use, if you change it a little bit, it starts to really look pixelated because it is. The normal process in design, whether you're using this for graphic design, web design, presentation, any type, I'm trying to think of different formats, an animation or film, text, anything that you use to create a project. Photoshop is literally meant to be the equivalent, the electronic equivalent of the darkroom. So here's where you edit your photos. Here's where you create designs. Now you can create other types of designs in Illustrator. That's why it's called Illustrator, right? Logos are done in Illustrator. But text, after you've created and saved your work in Photoshop, is then brought, the document is then brought into Illustrator where text is added. So for this assignment, I've clearly said don't put text in here unless it's part of the design. And what I mean by that is don't put text in here unless it's part of the design. And the example in Blackboard shows you an alphabet, right? It's got that colorful alphabet. That's not text. It's the illusion of text. It's text made out of shapes, and those shapes can be created in Photoshop or in Illustrator. Now, for the most part, you really only want to use Photoshop to work on images. We mostly don't use it as a creation tool, but you can use it as a creation tool. And in this case, we're going to use it just so you, just to cover how to use shapes and text. But for this assignment, don't use text unless it's part of the design. Use the text as a shape, because that's where it falls under the elements of design. Text is a shape. Now, one of the things I've noticed over the years, and I've been teaching design for a long time, is that most students treat text as an afterthought. It's just something they throw on the page using the defaults and don't really consider the style of the text. They don't consider the design. They don't consider the colors. They don't consider placement. It's just something they type across the page. Because for most of our lives, that's what text is. It's just a communication tool. You write a letter and you type in lines. For design, you don't do that unless it's appropriate. And it's almost rarely ever appropriate to just throw text on a page. So for this lesson, I really want you guys to get that. I want you to understand that typography is different than writing an English term paper. Typography is about the art of type. And type is an element that is shape. And it falls under all the same areas and same categories as shape. Okay, so what we're going to do is come over here to our toolbar, and you see right here I have the rectangle tool, and if I pull out that little corner, I've got the rectangle tool and several others that are all shapes. Now to start with, I'm going to just select just this basic shape, and if I come to the top, you're going to see I have my ribbon has changed. And I have shape and I have path. If you're drawing and you don't see a shape being created, it might be on path. That's the first place to check. You want it to be on shape. If it creates a path, that works with text so that you can put text on a path. And this is something that only used to be in Illustrator, but they recently brought it into Photoshop. Not that long ago. Okay, so then I have my fill color, which is the inside, and you can come in here and select all these different presets, or you can click in the upper right hand corner on my color picker, and you have access to my millions of different colors that I can pick from. Okay. The next is the stroke. If you don't want a stroke or you don't want to fill, select the no color option right here, which is that. And you'll see the white box with a line through it. That means I'm not going to have a stroke, which is a line around my box. If you want one, then you can pick a color, and then you can tell it. Let's go ahead and just pick a color so we can do this. And then you can tell it how thick you want that border to be, and then the style of that border. Now, if you know exactly how much or how big you want your shape to be, you can input that. I'm just going to draw it. And I'm going to come down here and click my starting point, hold my mouse, drag, and release. And this comes up every time, even though I've told it to go away. All right, so you see I have my fill color and I have my stroke color, and I can make adjustments to this while it's still fresh up here. Well, I've just put it in here. So if I change my mind about any of this, I can immediately change it to be something different. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this and tell it no color because I just want this basic shape. Okay, so now once I have that basic shape, I've come back to my move tool because maybe I want to move it around. Maybe I don't. Maybe I want to use it as a starting point. I think the default is the path, and I had been using the direct selection tool. Okay, so I want to use it as a starting point for another shape that I want to create. And I just want to show you this next. I think the path to selection tool is the default. I'm going to pull that out and go to my direct selection tool. If you use the path selection tool, it's going to select the whole rectangle. If you use the direct selection tool, and you guys probably have learned this in Illustrator, I can just select one point, and then I can make my shape into. Okay, so that allows you to modify a basic shape, and it is the direct, not the path, because if I select the path, you see all the points are now highlighted. It's only going to move the path. If I pull this out in direct selection tool, I can select just one corner. See, that one's solid blue and the others are hollow, and use that to modify my shape. This is something that's whoops, let me get out of this. This is something that's used more in logo design and illustration, but in Photoshop, you may want to create a simple design or a basic design, or you may want to, say I have an image under here and I want to use this to apply a filter. In fact, let's go back to our ellipse tool here. I'm going to select ellipse tool, pick a different color. Let's pick something. Okay. And you see how it changed it on me? It's very frustrating. I can go back here and select it. Okay, so I'm going to click off that layer over here. Whoops. I'm going to click off that, just click on the background. And now I'm going to create the other shape, my new shape, with the color I picked. Now, if you hold down the Shift key, it will keep that round. I'm holding down my Shift key. If I don't, I get this. Find a way to turn that off. They changed a lot of things for 2020. Okay, and then I don't want a stroke. Okay, and so now I have my second tool, and it's below, and it's where I want it. So I'm going to come back to my rectangle tool, and I'm going to change. Let's do, those colors are not very flattering, but that's kind of cool. Let's pick that one. And you see that allows you to create those transparencies that allow those shapes to work together. Or if you have an image underneath, it allows you to use that shape below it. Okay, I'm going to stop this part of the tutorial here, and we will continue in the next.